The fact that you sat down and put on the seatbelt saved your life, do you think?
I think so, yeah.
She was a little girl who survived the deadly crash of a school bus with a train.
16 years later, she's finally telling her story. Federal safety officials are now urging school systems to put seatbelts on all school buses.
And one crash on the Tennessee-Georgia line may be key evidence for that debate. News Channel 5's chief investigative reporter Phil Williams first began digging into that deadly crash and its life-saving lessons more than a decade ago.
And just recently, he finally tracked down the survivor.
You know, this is such a compelling case study. There were 7 children on the bus, 3 were killed, 3 were seriously injured, and then there's Brittany Gaddis. She hopes that by speaking out now about what happened to her back in 2000, other lives, maybe even your child's life, will be saved. What you are seeing is a real-life test of seatbelts on school buses.
Morning, baby. No Cody?
On a sunny March morning, 7 young children headed off to school, but they would never make it. 3 would never make it back home after the bus pulled into the path of a speeding train.
The next stop was when the train hit the bus. I'm waking up and then the front of the bus is gone and then there's the train, like right there.
Brittany Gaddis was the little 8-year-old girl who had sat down near the front of the bus right behind the driver.
I went out, but I had to like hold on to the train so I could step out of the bus.
And what was that like for such a little girl?
Terrifying. Like no kid should have to go through that, or their parents.
Brittany says her first thought was for her best friend Kayla, the little girl who had excitedly run to the back of the bus despite Brittany's pleas for her to sit up front. It's a regret that she still carries with her to this day.
I should have tried harder to get her to come up there with me, and maybe she would still be here.
That's a lot of pressure for an 8-year-old girl to put on herself.
Yeah. And then like you have to carry that with you all throughout life.
But it wasn't just where the seats were located that made a difference. The seat that Brittany chose just happened to have a seat belt that she believes saved her life.
I thought it was kind of cool that it had seat belts. So like, normally most of the seats didn't have seat belts, so I wanted to sit there and buckle up just to see what it'd feel like to buckle up on a bus.
This animation from the National Transportation Safety Board shows how the collision occurred, violently ripping the passenger compartment of the school bus off its frame. And this animation shows how Brittany's seatbelt kept her from being catapulted across the aisle.
I just remember waking up and like the seatbelt had just a little bit of thread left on it that was holding it together.
So what kind of injuries did you have?
All I had was the big bruise across my lower abdomen from the seatbelt.
While the other survivors were critically injured, Brittany spent just one night in the hospital.
And then I was lucky, I guess, just for one decision on the side just to buckle up. That's what saved my life.
But 16 years after that ride to school turned to tragedy, most school systems still have not put seatbelts on their buses, arguing it's just not worth the money. For those who say seatbelts are expensive?
It saves lives. I mean, it's either spend money or lose your child. I mean, which one would you rather do? Now, when we talked to the lead investigator on the case many years ago, she posed this question. If a child can survive a collision with a train with a bruise across the belly, then why in the world do we not have seat belts on every single seat? The reason most school systems will tell you comes down to this. School buses without seat belts are cheaper.
Is anyone pushing to require seatbelts on buses?
Well, yes, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration finally came back in November after years of study and recommended that all school buses should have seat belts. But it was just a recommendation. It's an issue that Tennessee lawmakers are expected to take up again later this legislative session.
It seems to make so much more sense to do that.
For a lot of people, it does.
All right. Thanks, Phil. Rory?